David Vose here. Well, it's another beautiful day here. A little windy. I guess kind of getting into those fall winds. And they're always fun because things blowing around out there. You got to be careful. The dust is kind of blowing through and stuff. But hope you're having a wonderful day where you are. Guys, I have, for me, and I'm just starting this video, so I don't know what the video is going to come out like. But I have something heavy on my heart, I guess is the way I would say it. And I hope I can express some of these thoughts today. I'm going to have to make this video like 2 hours or, I don't know, maybe more. I've got so much to tell you. And in order to make my point and prove it, there's going to have to be some deep philosophical explanations as well as some verses that we're going to have to look at. Now, I am going to do the philosophical logic, just talk to you a little bit before we get into the verses, because I think we've already been trained that when we see these verses in the Bible, we don't see them. We see what people have told us they meant, but we're not able to see them for what they really mean. So before we show you the verses, I'm going to have to just kind of talk philosophically for a little bit so that we can think about why we believe what we believe and start to wonder if maybe there's some other explanations for some of these verses. And then when we look at them under a new light, we'll say, what? Why didn't we see this? Why didn't we always know this? Because we were being drawn off in the wrong direction by a lot of scholars and people that wanted us to believe something that the Bible wasn't saying. So I can tell you already, this is probably going to be over 2 hours or something, this video. So I'm going to have to cut it in half. And for those of you who do not want to spend 2 hours listening to this, I understand. But I will just say this. I will give you this reassurance. I don't think you're going to be bored, but it is going to take a couple hours of your time. Why would you give up 2 hours of your time to watch this? Well, if some of you are trying to fully and completely understand what the biddly diddly the Bible's all about, what's really going on. Right now, when we're almost, what is this, the second or third? October 6th is something that might be a date on our calendar that we'll never forget. I really want at least as many of you as you can to watch both of these hour videos. They're going to be in 2 parts because I just can't imagine being able to do this without going on and on for at least 2 hours. But I'm hoping that you'll watch both of them. Start with the first one. The second one will probably be better because the first one is just, if you just watch the second one, because it's going to be better, because I'm going to get in some really neat things, I don't think you'll be able to understand fully the second video until you've gone through all this philosophical stuff that we're going to talk about in the first video. And we're going to take our minds on a little journey so that we can open it up to some bigger horizons. So please watch both videos, and I promise you won't be disappointed if you watch both of these. It's going to literally give you another perspective to understand the Bible. So keep that in mind. I was reading yesterday. I didn't do a video yesterday. I sat and read the book of Psalms. And I used to do that a lot. I used to read the book of Psalms a lot. I've read the Bible from beginning to end several times, and I would just pour through it day and night for years and just go over all those words and expressions and try to understand what's going on. And I always saw things, even in the present translations, I would notice things that sounded like maybe something was going on in this verse that nobody had ever seen. I'm going to share quite a few verses And one of my favorite, Psalms 48, beautiful for situation, the glory of all the earth, Mount Zion, in the remotest extreme parts of the north. Go around her, note all of her towers, her bulwarks. This one was born in her. Born in who? Where's this Mount Zion? Like Shambhala, Agartha, like this magnificent city in this place called the extreme part of the north. It seemed a little too real, not like some heavenly city, that's not real. And then I, never really understood what that meant anyway. I mean, you're talking about going somewhere. I could never imagine going anywhere without my body. Like, if heaven is somewhere where there is no bodies, then how would we even know who we were? Would it be like a little spirit floating around? And then would this just be a world of colors? Like rainbows and diamonds glittering and sunlight shining through the cracks into this brightness of his glory, and you're just, what is it, an actual throne, and the Lord is sitting on his throne, and all the angels are flapping their little wings, and do they really look like that? And it talks about the river that flows forth from his throne, the river of life, that the trees of life, and all of these things. I certainly can see that it's esoteric, that it refers to something, but one of the things I think most people never realize is, for instance, we've been talking about, is in the New Testament, it uses this word kingdom, and it constantly says the kingdom is within you. And so many people then have latched onto that and just decided that anything in this physical world just isn't real. Now, I was raised differently, so I have a jumping off point here. I don't know if a lot of you understand, but one of the contentions that Jehovah's Witnesses have towards other religions, aside from they don't worship Jehovah, yeah, they all do. But, we were told they didn't. They didn't mention his name enough. Of course, after 150 years of Jehovah's Witnesses putting out the fires in hell and declaring his name amongst all the peoples, Jehovah, 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 and putting it all back in the Bible 7,000 times, they got Protestants saying it a lot too now, and everybody's Jehovah, Jehovah, Jehovah. Well, what about Jesus? Like, is Jesus really Jehovah? And all of these theories. And is there a Trinity, or is deity just got three forms? Or are there three beings in one deity? Or there are all these things that people argue about. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, one of our beliefs, I think it's kind of an Adventist belief too, that people are too spiritual. Everything's too esoteric. The Bible says he created the earth and he made it to be inhabited even forever. It shall be established forever. That was its purpose. In Genesis chapter 1, the Lord made the world. He made trees and he said it was good. He made animals, he said it is good. And he made man and he said, have dominion over the animals and the birds and the fish of the sea. This is the dominion to make the world a paradise. So Jehovah's Witnesses latch onto that, and that's what they believe. In a physical paradise earth. We don't live in heaven. Nobody ever, they got off into that years after, where there was a little group of individuals that were going to go live in heaven and rule over all of us, like little angels flying around, I guess, or wherever heaven was. Nobody ever knew, and they never explained it. Because they taught that there is no heaven. That spirit is mind. Well, I agree with that. But they think that mind is like a computer. You plug it in and it works, calculates, you unplug it, it's gone. So your spirit ascends and there you go. You're just a little computer. I don't agree with that at all. If you die, you don't exist anymore. That's what they believe. But so there was that part of it. It's very matter of fact, almost according to science. The only resurrection would be that one day Jehovah would come and recreate the righteous, bring them up out of the grave, which is just a symbol for he's God, well, he can do anything, of course. So he just takes his magic wand and voila, creates a new one of us. And we come back, and now all of a sudden, for whatever scientific reason you can imagine, you are just you again, right? They say kind of like you were sleeping, but it's a little different than sleeping, that analogy. Sleeping, I'm still alive, just not consciously awake in the physical realm. But they believe that you're just not conscious at all. There is no consciousness when you die. You're just dead. Your elements go back into the ground and rot. The spirit goes into the air and dissipates. And somebody unplugged the computer and you're done. Now, if that computer gets crushed and burned in a fire, then all of the material aspect of its structure is also completely lost. You could recreate another computer just like it, right? And then plug it back in, put the same program, and then it's the same computer, right? That's not how I see it. That's not how the Bible describes it. That is the greatest lie, one of the most ridiculous doctrines that I've ever heard, because it's not taught in the Bible or any other scripture. However, the witnesses' view and their arguments that the physical realm is important. Now, the physical realm is important for Mormons too. They're not these type of persons that a lot of New Age movement went to, which was that everything was spiritual and that we're really spiritual beings, and this is all an illusion, this physical world. It's not even real. Completely opposite. Paradise in Genesis 1 is a symbol of something higher that we can't comprehend. But it's a description for us little puny minds. There's no real mountain or garden where the Lord is, right? Who knows what it's referring to? Wherever the divine source of the universe is, it's just mind. But the problem with modern understanding in that area is that they have also erred and have come to the conclusion that everything in the physical world is a delusion, and when you can let go of all pleasure and seek not for any pleasure, because pleasure, if you have it, you're also going to have pain. So you don't want any pleasure or else you're going to have pain. And we want to escape nirvana. We want to escape all pain and therefore all pleasure and therefore all thought. And they don't want consciousness. They want to go beyond in some kind of a existence, I guess, that doesn't have any lust, desire to live, or, I don't know. It's very difficult to even describe if one's trying to describe it, but they're basically saying you will then exist when you learn how not to exist. Like, when you can cease to have any pleasure in existence, then you will really exist. Huh? Okay, I never understood that either. And I saw Christianity going closer to that, because we were told that Christians were all pagans. Because we were told that all Christians were apostate, they were pagans, and that this was the main apostate view, is that the world wasn't real. This was the insanity of all of the pagans who all believed that Buddha sat in a position and opened up his chakras and blanked out his mind, and maybe he sat there for 40 years, right? And until he lost all consciousness, all desire. And I guess his mind just floated in a swirling mass of colors that he didn't pay any attention to, because that would be pleasure, right? Oh, those colors are beautiful. Smack! Grasshopper, take your attention off the colors and the pleasures and go back into the nothingness. That's where you belong. No, we don't. It's ridiculous. And I agreed with the Advent Jehovah's Witness view, which was, almost, but not at all, saying that we don't believe in the esoteric, the mind, the spiritual, but that now we're just materialists and we only believe in science, and nothing like that either, because we ridiculed science as well, right? Oh, science, because they don't know anything. Why? Well, on one hand, we had like two parts to our brain. On one hand, we were taught the world was all evil, the devil was evil, and yet we kept sending our children to school to be educated by the devil's school system, right? Teaching ungodliness and atheism, but yet we just send our kids to school. So for us, atheism, ungodliness, and wickedness was to believe there was no God, and that meant that there's this man with his long white beard sitting on this throne somewhere in yonder heavens. They used to think it was on this planet called Alcyon in the Pleiades. How insane, right? If somebody came up with that idea today and they didn't have any real reason to believe it or proof somewhere in the Bible, I would think it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. But these are all these thoughts. So I spent years thinking about these two things and thinking about heaven and looking at the Bible and realizing that the Bible did teach a place called heaven. And I finally realized that in the New Testament, where it says the kingdom is within you, it was the word basilia, which is not truly the word kingdom. You could say that, like you could look at Washington, D.C., and you could say, there's the kingdom of the United States, right? This is the government of the United States. Like the word government. Well, does that mean that the government is the United States? The United States is a land from sea to shining sea, 3,000 miles across, with mountains and meadows and fields and oceans and beaches, deserts, jungle type areas like in Florida with alligators. There's the land and the people are not the same as the government. So when you say the kingdom, what you're saying in Greek is the capital, the basilia, where all the business is done, and the priests go, and there's a Sanhedrin, and they make laws or whatever they do, and govern the country. That's the rule or the government. But it's not the land, it's not the country, it's not where the people live. So then I began to understand that the kingdom, in that sense, or the basilia, was the capital that ruled over the land. And so, our mind is what rules over the body. But the mind is such a thing that when you think with the mind, you immediately have images, thoughts, ideas. And those are not something you could say doesn't exist. Because if there were no thoughts, the thinker wouldn't exist. The thoughts are as integral to the being as the thinker. Every being has a thinker, and therefore they have thoughts. And the thoughts are the images, and this is the physical reality. So the physical reality can be a delusion only in the sense that we can imagine something that we might be imagining only out of fear or hate or ignorance. We might create boogeymans and not realize that we're creating the boogeyman and get scared of the boogeyman. Oh my goodness, a boogeyman! Ah! And not realizing that we're creating the boogeyman. So this is how I understand, and this is what I believe Buddha understood, and this is what I believe all the ancient scriptures teach. that you can't have one without the other. There will always be a physical realm that we will dwell in. Now, I do know, after doing all the research I've done for years and years and so forth, that there is more base carnal realms, and there are higher and higher subtle realms that are physical, but not as base or heavy, or therefore into the darkness area, a place of ignorance where a lot of monsters show up. That's preliminary as you grow. And as we grow, we are transformed. And then I began to understand what I felt was the teachings of all scriptures, not just the Bible, that the paradise that was made by the divine being was literally our world. It's a parable about our physical environment that is made by our hopes and dreams and our love and our imagination in the mind. And that we are a being that has the hopes and dreams and imagination, and therefore also lives in our hopes and dreams and imagination. And that truly, when Jesus said, whoever says unto that mountain, be thou removed, it shall, becomes absolutely understandable to me. That everything in this realm, whether it's even a mountain, even the firm reality that we walk upon, will eventually change as we improve our thoughts to the blueprint. Because somewhere in the universe, in a place in our collective consciousness, we all know that we want happiness and goodness. And there is a place where we dwell, but in a superconscious way. But we descend into this world where we can mix and match and pretend we're afraid and go through excitement and adventure. And maybe we kind of want to see boogeymen. We kind of want to be afraid. Like, isn't it weird how little children like to hear scary stories when they're going to bed at night? Mommy, tell me about the Little Red Riding Hood, right? And the big bad wolf. Oh, it's almost as if people like to pretend and they want the adventure. So, of course, the world's going to be full of the fear of all of this. But all we have to do is, when we grow up, realize that we're in control. That mind is the ultimate power. The being cannot be removed. We will always be. We're immortal beings. But our garments can be taken off and put on, and we can change our garments. And that is the things that we're presently believing because we're ignorant. And that ignorance fades, and we have understanding and wisdom when we grow in faith and in understanding every day. So I am one then who believes very clearly that though I understand the esoteric mind and all of the spiritual things that people talk about in maybe New Age circles or so forth, I also understand fully the concerns of somebody like a Jehovah's Witness that will say, but wait a minute, I don't want to be some ethereal being flying around in clouds, and rainbows. I have my family here. I like the peace of this earth. It doesn't really change very quickly. Trees grow, takes hundreds of years. The brook comes down from the mountain every year. The sun shines every morning. The stability of this physical realm is something real. And the Lord wants us to live in happiness and have good food and enjoy our families. That He created sex to be pleasurable. That He made water to quench our thirst. And He gave us beautiful fruit that grow on the trees that are colorful and sweet. And all of this is what is paradise and what is meant to be. So then, and of course recently, because we have realized that we've been taught from the time we're little in this modern realm in something we believe in more than even the Bible or the ancient traditions. And what we believe in today, most people, is that, those silly scriptures, they're probably just stories. There's no Noah. There's no Moses parting the Red Sea. Right? That ain't real. That's just, I don't know. little morality stories that we teach our children to be a good boy when they grow up, because a big bad wolf will get you. But there was no really parting of the Red Sea. I mean, those are impossibilities. Miracles don't happen. Jesus didn't raise the dead, and that would be impossible. Well, I suppose that didn't bother me when people said, oh, it's impossible. Because I always knew that if there was a divine mind, not a bearded man sitting on a throne up in the sky somewhere on another planet, but whatever this old man is, old man heaven, and in Mother Earth, I began to realize that was more of the ancient uh, symbolism for the world. And then I thought, okay, so does that mean that deity isn't real? No. The male aspect is real. There is a male and a female aspect to the universe. So, no, it is a male and a female. And in fact, all of this universe, a rock is part of it, a tree, water, flowers, they all seem to be shining their little vibratory, beautiful colors and their sweetness and their purpose seems to be for man. And this is just too bizarre for me to think it's a coincidence. So I tend to believe that everything is just perfect the way it is, and that only a divine mind could have designed it all like this, and that the universe just is this divine mind, the will, the being. But that the scriptures were written in such a way that they could speak all of this to a child, and as well, you could pick it apart and understand the scientific truth of all of this, just as we're doing. And this is how I've come to understand it. So, when I got to this point where I'm beginning to realize that we don't need an infinite black vacuum of space hundreds of light years away, which really means distances that you could never see, hear, smell, or know of, except some crazy know-it-all that decides their God decides in what 1948 that they decided now that they're scientists and they know that there are planets so far out there beyond stars that aren't even in our galaxy, and there's 500 billion stars in our galaxy. How they would know that, you and I have no clue. But beyond our galaxy is another galaxy, and it has, like even double, like we're in a small galaxy, so it's like a billion stars, and there are billion galaxies that, how do they know? Well, or, we can see them with this weird telescope that's not really a telescope. So I began to realize that all of that was fake. And just on a philosophical level, I don't believe that since the universe only exists as the images of a thinker, that anything could exist outside of the thought process of a thinker. And therefore, if we are the thinkers thinking all of this, that it seems to be all manifesting for us and all a big lesson, and we're graduating and enjoying and we're having dominion over all of this world. And it seems to me that the universe doesn't exist apart from our thought process. The physical universe doesn't exist somewhere out there if we didn't think it up. If we're not looking at it, seeing it, observing it, then it doesn't exist. Because our observations and thinking and our existence is the reason for everything existing. And therefore, I don't believe anything exists outside of our conscious awareness. Now, sitting here on the porch looking at my chickens and the garden, I am aware of the flowers and the chickens even before I even mentioned it. I was subliminally aware. And just like that, there are probably dreams going through some mechanism within my own mind that I may be reviewing thoughts before I even speak them. And I may not even be consciously aware of that. So there are things I'm not consciously aware of. But nothing in the universe exists outside of either my conscious awareness or my subconscious awareness, or even perhaps a super consciousness, which is what we call the divine being, the ultimate, highest, super conscious part of our existence in the light. And that's where I believe all of us exist. Wherever that is, that's where our being is. But because of that being, we manifest all the way down through the layers, even under the physical. And so everything we see in this physical realm, regardless of something going on behind in the background, the physical realm is only what we see. Well, let me put it this way. The story of, in the beginning, Elohim, plural, created the heavens and the earth. For me, that's the only thing I can even imagine or think about, is this heavens and this earth. If there are somewhere in the universe another heavens and another earth, light distances away, beyond a vacuum of time and space that we in the physical could not reach, without traveling a speed of light that somehow is equals mc squared and relative outside of our time and space. If I traveled at this speed of light, I would turn into light and I would be gone. So I couldn't get there. I'd be burned up. But if somehow I could get in a capsule that protected me through all of this insanity, and I traveled for 20 years stuck in a capsule, one day I would land on another realm. I would go through a void, an emptiness, a vacuum of nothing. And the only way I could get through it, because the only thing that can get through that is light, right? Light travels at this constant. I have to make up some crazy theory to imagine that beyond my imagination, beyond anything I could be conscious of or even dream of, beyond a place in my mind where I've conceived of as nothing, blackness of nothing for eternity that I could never reach. Because if I traveled the speed of light to get there, everyone on earth would be dead by the time I got there. This doesn't make any sense to me. And even if it were true, it means nothing to me to think about or contemplate about. All I want to know about is our universe, where we live, and where my thoughts matter, and our collective consciousness matters. We're not concerned with other universes beyond our collective consciousness anyway. So let's concentrate literally on this universe that we're in. I assume it's the only one. I really do. I don't think it's possible for there to be another universe, because there is no time and space in the mind. And therefore, that's the center of every time and space. You know, the basilia that's within us, that governs the kingdom or the land. Now, I went through all of that because I want you to understand that this is probably the correct understanding of the universe. It's not as crazy spiritual as some want to make it, that there's only mind and the physical universe just doesn't exist. It exists just as much as the thinker. The thoughts exist as much as the thinker. And lust and hate and all of this creates a very hard prison-like world that we're living in. A world of vengeance and hate. But we can transform our minds and learn and grow and throw out fear and become love, which is the true nature of our being. Having said all that, let me give you another thought process trip to explore, to go down. And there's a reason that I'm giving you these two illustrations, and then I'm going to read some verses in the Psalms. And I think it will blow your mind with having said all that we've said. So let me give you this little story. If you're reading a story in the Bible about a man named Moses and a people called the people of Israel, and in your mind it's this one group of people, and maybe a few million, 2 million people, 3 million people at the most or something. Some have thought it might have been about 1 million. Some thought maybe it was 2 million. There might be higher figures. And they're all becoming slaves in this place called Egypt. So Moses gets mad and he says, I'm leading you out of here. And the Lord comes down and says, I want you to lead my people out of Egypt. So they go and they have 10 plagues, and the firstborn dies, and gnats and frogs and all of this, and water turns to blood. And they take off and they go through the Red Sea, and it parts. It parts right down the middle, and they walk over on dry land. And then Pharaoh's armies goes in it, and it comes back and swallows them up, and they all die. And then they go and they're walking through this wilderness for 40 years. And Moses has his magic staff, and he puts his little staff and taps the rock and says, may their water come forth, and water comes out of a rock. And they're all hungry, and he's like, okay. And he shakes his magic wand at the ground or at the sky or something, and angels' food. Said they ate the food of angels. Well, where was the angels? We're going to find that angels dwell at the city of deity, at the sides of the north, at the extreme ends of the north. Pretty for situation, the glory of all the earth. Beyond the North Pole, Shambhala, Agartha, Mount Zion, the city of the king. And there is a city, and the angels are there. And somehow it's in the middle, and around it are these other 7 worlds, maybe the 7 continents. But this is how it's portrayed. Deity's on his throne, he's got a big city, and all the angels are there. And then we find out that we're the angels. So in our higher self, we're all there, and our angels behold the face of the Lord. Well, were the children of Israel at the North Pole? Did they part, was it the Red Sea, or did they part the ocean? I don't know. We have said that Moses went to 2 different mountains. Mount Horeb on the astrological wheel would be the summer solstice. And Mount Sinai, the moon, would be the bottom, and the darkness would be the winter solstice. So we have 2 choices. This whole thing that Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt. Egypt could be a symbol of the world. Christians do that all the time. They say it's a symbol of this worldliness. We're getting out of the worldliness into the kingdom of the Lord. Well, could we then say that perhaps it's a parable of ancient days when somehow there was a cataclysm and mankind did go to the North Pole where it was paradise, but we rejected it. And so we could not enter in. Maybe the promised land is the city of the Lord at the North Pole, but we rejected it. So we wandered in this 360-degree circle peripheral down here in the carnal world that's around that central place up there at the North Pole. Stretch the earth like a flat earth. We're out there with all this land that we live on that we understand. We're in the same physical conscious realm that we were before, but our minds have fallen. We don't have access to the higher subtle bodies, and we're just stuck here in this physical body like a prison, and we just keep reincarnated back into this world over and over again. But we're not in the city of the Grand King beyond the North Pole anymore. This was before Atlantis fell. This was the days of Atlantis. Over the Atlantic. Maybe it was somewhere, like the New World, America. We'll get to that. We'll get to that because from Egypt or Palestine, if you go north from there, you go over the North Pole and you come to America, West Coast. Just saying. But maybe this is a story that is a parable, but yet telling parabolically what happened to mankind in ancient days, why we're not in heaven, because we rejected it. Which probably means that there's still a place, there in Eden, where whoever doesn't reject it can dwell in paradise. But when your mind is in this lower place in hate, vengeance, we're being ruled over by the deity of this world, right? There's a whole nother world, but it's still a physical world. Where is it? It's on the physical plane somewhere. So what is this stuff that fell down from the sky, the food of angels, called manna? It came down from the sky or something, or they'd wake up in the morning, it would just be there. It would just be all over the ground. They'd gather it up, and it would only last until the end of the day. And if they gathered up too much, it would spoil, and there would be worms in it, and it would... What? This sounds like something literal, but nobody really knows what it was. And on, they go to a certain place, and there's a bunch of people there that don't want them to be there, and they're giants, and they miraculously defeat them. In one case, they go to Jericho, and they don't literally have a war with swords and shields and all of this, but they just have trumpets, and they dance, and they march around the city 7 times, and all of a sudden, the city just collapses. So a lot of miracles going on here. Now, you say, okay, do you believe all of that? Most Christians say, yes, we do believe all of that. Why? Well, because it's in the Bible. There are a lot of things that's in the Bible. David killed Goliath. Okay, maybe we could believe that, right? With a good shot on a slingshot, hit him right in the temple. Boom! Knocked him out cold. He goes over there while he's knocked out and slices his throat, whatever. We can imagine that. There were stories about Samson, who could, with a jawbone of an ass, destroy an entire army. Or, he was so strong because of his hair, his vow, that he could get his hands up against the pillars of a temple and just push it over. The whole temple, like one of the greatest temples, just pull it, the temple up at in the Philistine temple, probably Baalbek or something up there. He just pushes it over. Well, miraculous battles. In one case, an angel came down and killed 185,000 Assyrians in one night. A lot of things. There was a pillar by fire at night. It's not like it just happened like voila with a magic wand either. I mean, literally the story is that the Lord followed them in a pillar of light by night and a fire by day. Moses sat there and saw the Lord. There was this emerald dome over him, and it was this like pavement that led up to his throne. I think that's interesting. There was another story, was it Avalon or Agartha or something? But you go over this rainbow bridge, a rainbow bridge to get there. Well, the Aurora Borealis is a beautiful rainbow colors. And it is kind of emerald green, right? Maybe that's the arc of colors, this emerald glistening dome. And if you go into that glistening dome at the North Pole, maybe you're entering into the secret place of the Most High. I don't know. Isn't it interesting that Dorothy, she went to the Emerald City, right? And 3 of her friends went there to get courage, a brain, or a heart, right? Because that's where you get all of these wonderful things that makes you a perfect, real person, right? And Dorothy was just a child. But it was this huge vortex that took her off, and she went to this faraway place where there was flowers and gardens and the Emerald City. And there was the Wicked Witch of the West there too, by the way. But that beautiful fairy would grant all of Dorothy's wishes. Oh, what a beautiful story. Maybe that is the elite saying, oh yeah, we know what's beyond the North Pole, but we're not going to tell you, but only, give you hints. But in the story with Moses, the 72 elders went up with Moses and Aaron, and there was a table, and they all sat down and had a meal with this deity. And it was like fire and brightness and what to make of all of this? Well, what if, just saying, what if the dating, the patriarchs' period of living in their lifetimes, their ages, when they died, when they were born, when they had a child, all of these genealogies, what if they're coded and they're not real? I mean, first of all, Adam lives 930 years. That's a whole lot longer than we live today, and we just like, well, that's just how long they live, Dave. Closer to perfection. Okay. But these individuals that we have in our Bible are all mentioned in the Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Sumerian tablets and the Babylonian and all the rest. And in their tablets, these same kings with this, most of them pretty much the same names, but just how they would pronounce it in their country or whatever, lived thousands of years. Not hundreds, thousands. So I maintain that this Adam lived somewhere that was before our present world exists in this form. Because the flood was such a thing that it may be that the Bible is telling us a real story about this flood, but that it's not the real thing that we think it is. In other words, it's not just that the earth was a globe, because that's what we believe. We're told we're in a globe. Maybe it wasn't a globe. Maybe we're not understanding this. So maybe the ark is a symbol of something. It's got bitumen. It's anointed. There's doves and there's ravens. That's interesting. White and black. There's 8 people. And they bring 2 of each of the animals. Sounds like a story, literal story about saving all the animals because a great flood's going to destroy the world, just like it says. But yet you can make different things out of it. You could say it's symbolic of our present order or body that has all these animalistic natures in it. We find that it kind of goes back to some esoteric meaning, like astrology. And we've discussed that in my videos. Now, I always, to get around all this, I always say, well, I believe there was a flood. I don't know if it was worldwide, but I don't think that's impossible because I believe there were cataclysms. And before the last cataclysm, there was another world, and it was a completely different world. And I believe wherever this garden is that was created by Elohim and Adam and Eve were put in it, is something that is real regardless of whether we understand it. Because this description of this garden is in every nation's account of their history, of their beginnings. We've got in our Bible Mount Zion in the remote parts of the north. Every other nation's got stuff like Shambhala and Agartha and Asgard and many different Avalon. We've talked about a lot of these. There's something to this story. We have to also believe that it has something, that it would have to be literal to some degree, because we are in a physical world and we're talking about how this world got here. And why wouldn't there originally have been a paradise? Why wouldn't it have originally been manifested in its perfect beauty? And why wouldn't that be the center of a place that was more wild, that we got sent out to conquer? Why wouldn't we want to go out from our home into the wilderness and beat down the brush, find the right tree, cut it open and cut it up and make a log cabin and find a beautiful spot where we could have a family and grow a family. Why wouldn't we want to do that? But if we are alive and we believe in immortality, then obviously these little adventures, we would forget our life before, but it would be running in the background. We would have that experience, those memories, and we would always be trying to explore and learn more. All this makes sense to me. So it makes sense to me that that this place is in some ways not in any particular place in time. Because the recesses of the infinite past, we'll never be able to remember all of that. And I don't suppose we would want to. I certainly wouldn't want to remember being a bug on a tree and getting eaten by a bird, which happens about every 5 seconds in the insect world. I wouldn't want to be a jackal being ripped apart by a cougar. I don't want to have those memories consciously. They're in there subconsciously. I've learned from all of that. I wouldn't want to have a memory, even several hundred years ago, where I may have been on the battlefield and somebody's bludgeoning me with a spear on the end of his rifle and then taking his, tomahawk and murdering my family right before me and raping my, I wouldn't want any of those thoughts or memories consciously. But I could certainly have done all of those things. And all of those things could be maybe adventures or maybe we like to pretend and there's fears that we have to overcome, so we go through all these examples. But I still believe that there is this utopian manifestation that we, in some sense, had in the beginning. And we're trying to make the rest of the universe conform to this beautiful place. We're going to have more children, send them out, and they're going to build more paradises beyond the original sphere. So why wouldn't there be an original place where we were, where it is untouched, where it's the prototype, and we're here in another world trying to conquer it now? And why wouldn't those worlds be connected somehow? And maybe we're connected through this infinite plane that we've been talking about. That makes more sense, that we're connected by an infinite plane or a mental connection, a thought process that would be in some chain link and not beyond some vacuum of space in a universe so far beyond that we couldn't see it, hear it, or even imagine it. It makes more sense that the universe is all in one place, from the highest to the lowest, on an infinite plane. And that in the center of this, or somewhere in this infinite plane, there is this garden. And if there were, then that would just be a fact. How would we then, in the Bible, describe this? Would we say, oh, Moses took the children to Mount Horeb, which is the daytime, the light, and then Sinai's the darkness? Perhaps Moses is a symbol, because remember, even the Apostle Paul says we were all baptized into Moses. And we were all there at the foot of the mountain, and we all said, yes, this we will do. This is a symbol of why we're all under this deity of vengeance and why we're down here going through all of this. So if the Garden of Eden really represents the infinite blueprint and the infinite reality of our existence that we've got in our highest basilia, our highest part of our mind, that's the immortal being that we are. And in that place is absolute felicity and perfection. But we don't want to live in that absolute perfection all the time. We want to go out in the wild and learn. Well, wouldn't we be trying to make our world as perfect as we can? And once we had conquered it, we would then have children that would then go out and have to do everything we did all over again. We would train them up so they could succeed as we did. And in our old age, what would we do? Just sit around the fire being completely happy, knowing that our children succeeded and they're out there doing it just as we did. So I could imagine our Heavenly Father and our Heavenly Mother, the most distant ancestor that you could imagine, before a cataclysm on this earth that shaped the world as it is, where we had to start over again. And as children of our Heavenly Father and Mother, we had to go out there and do just as our Father and Mother did. That makes sense to me. And if I'm looking at the Bible and I see a story in the book of Psalms that says that when this is all over and the day of judgment comes, Jesus is going to come down from this city that's somewhere in the north. And there's bulwarks and towers and there's going to be a gate, and all the nations shall pass by the gate and be amazed. And then Jesus comes through the gate. Where is this? Well, it's at the North Pole, it says. Beyond the North Pole is this place called the City of Zion. Beautiful for situation. The gate opens, and here comes the great King, King of glory. And when he comes, he starts taking out the ships of Tarshish and Meshach and all the kings of the earth. You know, Psalms chapter 2. Kiss the king lest he be angry and you perish in the way. The day of judgment has come. He's sick of you guys down here keeping everybody in subjection and manipulating people. Right? A lot of the weak have fallen behind. Some of the more less desirable characters have learned how to manipulate their brethren, and the world's kind of gotten very, very difficult, which strengthens people to overcome. And this need to overcome this dragon makes complete sense now. In our world, we've got a dragon. We've got to overcome it. So where is this perfect paradise that we were from? Well, it's not a place that we're going to necessarily go back to. It's a place that we were from. We're in this world trying to make it a better place, trying to defeat the dragon. And when we do, we're going to marry the lovely princess and start our own family. This is what makes sense to me. Okay, what makes sense to me doesn't mean that's what it is. However, when I look at the Bible and it literally tells me that beyond the North Pole is a city, and it's all throughout the book of Psalms, all throughout, very clear, talks about how the mountains will melt at his presence. The King of glory will come down. And then it makes sense. Well, if Jesus had flesh and bones, as you see that he did, and you touch me and see the holes in his hands and in his feet where he was pierced, and he says, but I am not a spirit, then where did Jesus go? Well, you know what? There is a scripture in the book of Psalms that tells you exactly where he went. He was hidden in the secret place, a place of refuge, the secret place of the Most High, in his tabernacle. Some very interesting verses in this book of Psalms. And there's a couple of them that I want to read to you today, specifically, that you have to ask yourself, is this, what does it mean? Is it symbolic of something? But what is it symbolic of? This is the physical world that we're going to live in. I believe that. We're going to make it better. We're going to make a paradise out of it. We're going to conquer the dragon. We're going to defeat the devil. Gain victory by the word of our witnessing. And then we'll move on to other realms. But I don't then take this city of the living deity to be on some other planet, because I don't believe in other planets out in the vast vacuum of nothing, beyond anything that we could even, Jesus took off on a spaceship. I don't believe that. I don't believe Jesus is somewhere held up in some motel, for a couple thousand years, waiting to let us know that he survived or something, because that's ridiculous. He wouldn't be here if he had the authority and the power and Jesus was here. He wouldn't be sitting somewhere in some hotel. That would mean he'd have to be in a cave somewhere. What cave? Nobody ever found this man living, like Elijah in a cave somewhere? None of this makes sense. So it makes perfect sense then that he is just as the book of Psalms says. He was hidden away in a place beyond the North Pole. Let me show you that verse. Well, before we move on, right here in Psalm 15, what's on the page, it says, Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? Why is it a holy hill or a mountain? Couldn't it just be what it says? Maybe there is a holy hill, a holy mountain. And who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Is there a tabernacle there? Or is this talking about at the time of the end, there will be a tabernacle, a place of refuge in a mountain, a holy hill, directly north and beyond the pole from where David was living, which I think was Egypt. But guys, I'm going to stop it here. Like I said, I've already done the whole hour. I've done another whole hour after this that I'm going to put up tomorrow, and that's going to be better than the one we watched today, because I'm going to take you through some verses you never knew existed and put some things together for you that you've never even thought about before. It is so amazing. So I'm going to end it here. Hope you guys have a wonderful evening. The Lord will bless you. We'll see you tomorrow right back here, same bat channel, same bat time. Going to blow your mind. So have a wonderful evening, guys. His grace and his peace will be with you all. The Lord loves you. See you tomorrow. Have a good one.